Hello, I'm James,
Hi, I'm Jimmy,
and welcome to A Job Done Well.
the podcast that helps you improve your performance and enjoyment at work.
Good afternoon, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, James. How are you?
I am fabulous, thank you very much. I keep telling myself that every morning when I look in the mirror. So what we're talking about today?
You've even done that joke multiple
Yeah, but I've
times.
only got very few jokes. Yeah, I mean, they are going to come round every now and again. When you've only got 7, yeah, what do you expect?
That's true. I stand corrected.
And anyway, it wasn't a joke, it's what I actually do. I stand there, you are a winner.
The power pose.
Absolutely, every morning. Right, go on then, tell me, what are we talking about?
Well, today we have a very, very important and interesting episode. We are going to be talking about grief at work, and that is something that we all experience, and it impacts us, our colleagues, our team members, our boss. Everyone at some point gets impacted by grief. But it's never on a development program, an HR course or induction. Nobody teaches you how to deal with grief in the workplace. And so it is a much ignored subject. So we have Lou with us today, who is a grief guru. She will tell you all about herself and her journey. She's going to help us understand a bit more about grief and how it impacts people's work and how we can support people through that process. Before we get into that though, James, what have you been up to?
I had a rather unfortunate episode this weekend.
Excellent. Look forward to hearing.
I had some friends, some university friends, and we're going back a long time, some very old friends, and they came up to Nottingham. And we thought, well, we'll go out for a walk, because that's what you do when you're an old middle-aged bloke. So we went out for a walk. We thought we'll go to Sherwood Forest. So anyway, we're walking around Sherwood Forest, minding our own business, 4 perfectly respectable middle-aged blokes. And all of a sudden we walked by 2 blokes who were, excuse the terminology, stark bollock naked, sitting in a forest naked.
Wow.
And we were all like, eyes front, keep walking. So we walked past these guys. And anyway, walked on a little bit further, and in the distance you could see 3 more naked people walking across a path which was obviously going to cut across our path. So we all slowed down. And these people walked past, and they got walking boots on, and they got hats on. But other than that, yeah, not a stage. And I obviously stumbled across, I'm not sure whether it's, what do they call it? Is it naturist or naturalist? But I stumbled across a closet.
Stumbled across, James.
And that's the problem, because that's what my friends said. Yeah, they're like, oh, yeah. Do you come here often? So that was the highlight of my weekend. But why would you, right? Why would you go and strip off in Sherwood Forest? I mean, it's full of creepy crawlies. I mean, it's not, I could see it in the south of France, but Sherwood Forest? Really? Anyway, so there you go. That's what I am.
So now we know why you keep going on holiday to south of France.
Well, absolutely.
And there is definitely an image that no one needs.
Yeah. What did you do?
This week, James, I have the joy of double birthday time. So my daughters are 19 and 22 on the Friday and next Monday. So this time of year, it's all about cookies, cakes, balloons. You'd have thought at their age, they wouldn't want this sort of stuff. But yeah, they want all the little things. But then they've got bottomless brunch for their birthdays.
Bottomless brunch.
I want balloons, but I'm going to bottomless brunch. So it's that transition that they're still kids at heart. Anyhow, welcome, Lou. Thank you for joining us. And as we won't do you or your story any sort of justice, do you want to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, hi, I'm Lou Hynes, and my story is based on my own lived experience and how I have switched my business and what I do now based on my experience of my husband dying extremely suddenly just over 2.5 years ago. So in December 22, he took himself off to bed, not feeling very well. We'd all had, the winter sort of snuffles. And that was a Saturday. And a few short hours later, he had collapsed unconscious. Ambulances were called. He was taken into resus. Shortly thereafter, taken into the intensive care unit. He had very intense swelling on the brain. They didn't know what it was. Sadly, tragically, it was a very rare form of bacterial meningitis, and it had killed him within hours. So I was suddenly taken from planning what we were going to get the kids for Christmas to planning a funeral for my 40-year-old, young, healthy, fit, incredible husband. And so, plunged into the depths of grief, becoming a young widow with 3 young children. And what I found as that sort of journey unfolded really was just how bad people are, and we all are. And I know that I had been guilty of this as well because of my lack of experience. We are so atrociously bad at grief as a nation, as a society, as a culture. And so I have now made it my mission to help to change that and help to make the world a more grief-literate place. And so, I go into businesses, I support people one-to-one and help them understand grief, help them know how they can best support grieving people. And grief comes in, all manner of formats and guises. And all based on, I'm living it, I'm breathing it every single day, but I'm sort of working through it and using my grief to fuel this bigger purpose that I now find myself with.
A real inspirational story, but your point about us not being able to deal with it, I hold my hands up. I can do the sorry for your loss. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I'm like a little bit floundering about what I do and how I deal with people. But you've got some really fascinating stats as well as to why, apart from the obvious, but why really is this important for organisations and people who are in work to understand this and do something about it?
I think it's grief doesn't end when you come back from having had the funeral. And I think we need to understand that. And the person that comes back after whatever bereavement leave they might have been given or whatever time off they might have needed, the person that comes back to work after that is not the same person that left prior to their bereavement. 23% of the UK adult working population will experience a bereavement in a given 12-month period. So that's a quarter of the workforce experiencing a significant loss over the course of a year. And that is just, in that time frame. What about all of the grieving people, all of the people who've had a loss 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago? It still affects you. It still is, grief is forever. It doesn't just sort of miraculously disappear after 12 months and aren't you over it yet? And so it's so vitally important to understand that actually a huge portion of your workforce, of your employees, are carrying around this very incredibly heavy burden of grief, and no one is really trying to understand them. No one is really trying to do anything about it, to support them, or just ask how they're doing. And I think the more we can bring, and like you just said, yes, we can all kind of do the awkward, I'm so sorry for your loss. The more we can bring grief into the conversation and start to have those, difficult, awkward conversations, the better.
There's a point here which I think reinforces your point, Lou. So the analyst news came out with that stat, and I'm thinking 23%, really?
Yeah.
But when we had the conversations, you pointed out to me, well, how am I to determine who's important to you, where the grief is?
Yeah, exactly. A lot of bereavement policies are based around quotes, close family members. Some of you might not be close to your dad that might have just passed away. Your uncle might have raised you, but yet you would not be eligible for the same amount of leave if it wasn't a close relative. So, who gets to define how close of an emotional connection you had? And there's a direct correlation between the level of emotional pain that you will feel at the loss of someone or something and the level of emotional connection that you had with that person or thing. Take pets, for example. People that haven't had a dog or a cat go, oh, what's the problem? It's only a dog. It's like they don't understand that actually that is a key member of your family who has been loyal to you for perhaps 15 years. And that's a huge, huge loss. So it's really, it's really dependent on what that person meant to you and how much of a connection there was. So who is the manager, the boss, the leader to dictate how you're supposed to feel about that?
Just to highlight that, my dad passed away a couple of months ago. We never really were very close, and actually we hadn't really talked for 5 years before he passed away. Don't get me wrong, he was, being my dad, was a constant in my life one way or the other, but we weren't close. So I don't really think I felt grief that much. But if I think about if one of my dogs passed away, I'd be unable to function for a period of time. I am quite confident, just because how much they mean to me. But if somebody had said that to me before I was a dog owner, and I am quite a recent dog owner, I would have thought they were mental. I couldn't get my head around it at all.
Yeah.
So we do have very closed and fixed views on it.
Yeah, and there's kind of like an assumed sort of hierarchy, isn't there, of, oh, well, they're your parent, they're a spouse, but it depends on the complexity of the relationship. There's an assumed hierarchy of how much you will grieve, depending on who that person was in relation to you. But all of that goes out the window.
So basically, with the numbers you're talking about, someone around you, team members, colleagues, boss, people around you are going through this now. But just help us understand a little bit more about what is grief and how it actually really impacts people.
I use grief as the sort of the umbrella term, if you like, for all of those complex emotions that you feel. Usually all of the complex emotions that we're told to sort of hide because they're not seen as socially acceptable to show pain, to show resentment, to show fear, anxiety, guilt, shame. There's so many complex emotions that come with grief. And I kind of talk about grief is like the rucksack. And in that rucksack, you put all of those different feelings and emotions. You put the fear, you put the shame, the guilt, the resentment, the anger. You put all of that, and then we carry that rucksack around with us. And it's really, really heavy, because what we don't often get the opportunity to do is to unpack that rucksack and unpack all of those difficult feelings that we're feeling. So that's how I sort of explain grief. Grief is also neurological. It also affects our physical bodies. So how that then shows up in the workplace is that someone could come in and they are absent-minded. They're forgetful. You know, you can kind of look at them and you sort of like the lights are on, but nobody's home. They might, aches, pains, illnesses, especially when grief goes unprocessed, is left to sort of just fester and not be worked through, not to go through any kind of healing process. Then physical illnesses become a result of that. Things like anxiety, depression, other mental health issues are significantly correlated with grief. I found, and this was a really weird one that no one had told me about, but it's quite common apparently, I can no longer read a book from start to finish. I was an avid reader. You ask me to read a book now, can't do it. I can read, obviously, but it's just that ability to focus on something. So now I use audiobooks. So if you're giving an employee a stack of, a huge report to read, that's just like, and I'm over 2.5 years into this journey now. I still can't do it. I still find it really, really difficult. And I'm sure it will come back. I know it does, having spoken to other people. But it's just kind of being mindful of what grief does to your brain and your body, and making those adjustments, making those allowances where necessary. But people can't do that if they don't understand what's going on with that person.
So what happens if you don't unpack the rucksack? If you just can you just carry it around and just... Yeah,
you can carry it around. You can carry it around with you, and you can never unpack it. Lots of people, I'm sure we all know people that have never unpacked that rucksack. What will inevitably happen though, and I don't know if any of you have ever read The Body Keeps the Score. It's not an easy read, but it's a very enlightening read. All of the trauma that comes with death, loss, bereavement, etc., gets stored in the body, and the body has to do something with that. And so something like a physical illness can be a manifestation of unprocessed loss. Depression can be a manifestation of unprocessed loss. And if we never unpack that rucksack, grief is cumulative, and grief gets cumulatively worse. So I've worked with people, they might have lost a parent 20 years ago, never dealt with that. Yeah. And then 10 years ago, their beloved dog has died. And then 18 months ago, their sibling passed away. And there's this accumulation of unprocessed, unworked through grief that all of a sudden it just comes back and bites you on the bum, big time.
And I suppose as a society, we're not great at dealing with that. It's almost like, well, that happened. That's very unfortunate. We don't really want to talk about it. Let's sweep it under the carpet.
Yeah. And I think, and this is where it becomes a really important kind of two-way dialogue, really, that we as grieving people kind of like, yeah, we're fine. Oh, yeah, I'm fine, thanks. We don't want to be a burden to the person that's asking. We know that us crying or expressing our true emotions in any way makes that other person feel uncomfortable. So it gets pushed under the carpet. Or we're again taught by society, like you say, that, well, you should be fine by now. Just, I'm fine. Stiff upper lip. And this is a cultural thing, especially for us Brits. Stiff upper lip, let's just carry on. I'm fine. I'll deal with it in my own way. And actually it never gets dealt with, really. And so ultimately it comes back, in some other form that's much less healthy. What we see as well, there's behaviours, and we call them acting out behaviours. So some are healthy, some are not so healthy, as a way to avoid dealing with the grief. So you might see that people are coming back to work, really throwing themselves back into work, which, great, brilliant. Come on back. Come on. That's a brilliant distraction. But there's a watch out there if that person is using work as a way of not having to think about the pain.
Yeah.
There's other examples that could be seen as a healthy thing that they're doing. Somebody might go and hit the gym. Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
They're getting stronger. They're keeping fit. They're healthy. Is that an alternative to sitting in the grief? There's other more obvious, less healthy distractions like drinking, smoking, gambling, shopping, scrolling online, all of those things that we do to distract ourselves from our real feelings. So that's another watch out as well. And that's another way that grief avoidance can manifest itself in ways or behaviours that aren't particularly healthy. One thing that I did, and I can see this was a bit of an acting out behaviour, was I launched a Just Giving page to raise money for Meningitis Now, because I felt I had to put that pain somewhere. And that pain for me was, well, right, let's raise some money. And I've since raised almost £10,000 for that charity to raise awareness and funding to support people. But I can see, looking back, that was a way for me to redirect my grief. Thankfully, it was a healthy way for me to redirect and do something with it other than actually deal with it.
As well as recording this podcast, we help individuals, teams, and entire organisations achieve outstanding results.
If you'd like to find out more about how we can help you, please get in touch. Email either jimmy@ajobdonewell.com or james@ajobdonewell.com.
One of the things that you said about the acting out behaviours that I would have definitely been guilty of is when somebody in my team had a bereavement, I would always say to them, look, take as much time as you need. Don't worry about your work. We'll cover everything you need to. But if it's useful or helpful to you to come into work and to distract yourself on that, then I'll leave it to you.
It's a really, really tricky one, because for some people, coming to what they need, and they might not then realise they need more support in a different way until 6, 9, 12 months down the line. Being really specific with people. So it's great that you offered them that support to take as much time as you need. One thing to perhaps say instead could be something more like, because again, grieving people, their brain is just an absolute mess, right? They can't process information very well. Rather than kind of give an open-ended option in terms of take all the time you need, say something, as a manager, something more like, I'll check in with you in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Let's see where you're at. And then shall we have weekly calls from then on? Something very sort of time specific, so that they kind of go, okay, I've got 3 weeks breathing space, or however long you decide between you is relevant. And then weekly calls after that, or if you would like to come into the office to chat anytime, I'm available. That kind of thing is much more helpful than them being given a sort of indefinite amount of time, however long later, to be like, well, where the hell are you? Your work's piling up.
I wonder when I've now look back on that, at what point would I have thought to myself, well, actually, they should be back now, or I need them back, or are they okay? When we talked about this episode, you had some scary but not surprising facts about how people react when they feel their organisation hasn't supported them through the grief process.
Yeah. If a griever or a bereaved person is coming back to work and they haven't felt supported in a way, and this is when, grief is unique to every single individual. We all grieve very, very differently. My way of grieving is completely different to yours and completely different to the next person's. If they come back and they are not supported, over half of those bereaved people will leave within 12 months of that bereavement. They will walk out the door. Yeah. They will go and find another job elsewhere where maybe they don't have to admit that they're grieving. Maybe they can just sort of bury it. But, so you are potentially losing a huge amount of value, and that costing the company an awful lot of money to re-recruit that person with that same amount of knowledge. There's often millions of pounds worth of knowledge and insight walking out that door if that person doesn't feel supported. So there's 51% of people will leave within the first 12 months.
Yeah. Even if you're a bit hard-nosed about supporting people through these times, that's a scary number to wrestle with. So apart from my open-ended offer, what other things do you see organisations doing that you just think that's not the right thing, or that's not going to help people?
One thing that I have heard, which was truly astounding, was a gentleman who had lost his child, took the time off, was, let's say sort of forcibly encouraged to return to work sooner than he was ready to. And the rest of the team, the rest of the office were told not to speak to him. Do not speak to him. I think from a place of very, what should we say, well-intentioned, it was like, we don't want to upset him. Let's just leave him to get on with it. He's going to be clearly upset. Don't say anything. And so the rest of the team were like, well, oh my goodness, how can we not? But we've been told not to. We don't want to upset him. We don't want to make him cry in the office. That would be awful for him. And that is the single worst thing that you can do, is ignore it, is pretend it hasn't happened. That person has never going to forget that it's happened. By not acknowledging their loss, that's just like, that is like number one. Do not do that. Yeah. So that is terrible. In my own experience, I've had an old school mum friend person actually hide behind a bin outside Tesco Express and pretend that she was on the phone so that she didn't have to talk to me.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I mean, utterly ridiculous. Rather than just sort of approach me and say, Lou, I've heard about what's happened. I'm so sorry. She actually pretended to be on the phone and hid behind the bin.
It's incredible that our personal awkwardness is more important to us than compassion.
Yeah. And what I say to people when they say that, I feel so awkward, I feel so uncomfortable. It's like, not anywhere near as uncomfortable as they feel. Mm-hmm. They've just lost their person.
But presumably lots of organisations, then they will have a very hard and fast set of rules. And this is, if it's a spouse or child, you can do this. If it's a parent, you can do that. And it'll all be very regimented, and they get this many days, and presumably that's all unhelpful.
Yes. And I can kind of see why a company would have to have quite sort of strict policies in place, but that isn't taking into account any kind of personal relationship, any kind of acknowledgement of what grief actually is and how long grief lasts. That's just very much them thinking about their bottom line and not about the well-being of that particular individual. For me, if any company can, I would always recommend that, like we've just discussed, have a conversation with the person. Say, I'll be back in touch in a month, however long. Because they might want to come straight back. They might need a month off in a year's time. It might all of a sudden just hit them. And so just by saying, if it was a parent, you get 3 days to attend the funeral. That's it. So understanding actually, this is a huge, huge burden. It takes an enormous toll on the person. And yeah, it's not a one size fits all thing. You can't have a kind of cookie cutter approach to this. Let's be human about it. This is a human experience, one of the single most human experiences that we will all experience it at some point in our lives.
Yeah.
Let's just have a bit of compassion here.
You'd hope that a lot of organisations with their policies, their desire is to help people and care for their employees, and ultimately being a bit hard-nosed about it to get the best performance and to get the best results out of their people to help their business success. If you think about your stat about people leaving if they don't feel supported through that process, I mean, James is the analyst here. He could easily work out if you've got 23% of the people in a year struggling with grief and then half of the people that aren't supported through it, you could work out the math that it's going to be material in terms of the impact on companies' performance ultimately.
Yeah.
Even if you're hard-nosed about it, even if you're not going to be caring about things, from a results and a business perspective, surely you've got to do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of companies do on the face of it as a bit of maybe a tick box exercise to look like they're adhering to the company values. But even people that are mental health first aid trained, they don't get trained in bereavement.
No.
So for me, there's sort of 3 perspectives. So if I am listening to this and I am a company HR director, what should I be doing? If I'm listening to this and I'm a manager, what should I be doing? But also if I'm listening to this and I'm an individual who's going through the grieving process, what should I be doing? So sorry, I should ask 3 questions in one. Could we unpack that? I mean, what would your advice to people be?
Well, I think, sorry, just to add a 4th in, you're going to have colleagues as well who are going through it. So how should I support a colleague?
So if you're an HR director of that company, have a look at your policy, take a look at previous examples of where you might have been dealing and supporting a bereaved person. Get feedback, get their feedback. We don't seek feedback often enough, do we? Especially not in sort of company culture.
True. Yeah.
Get through what worked well for you. What could we have done better in this instance? What if it happens to you again? What would you need from us as a company? And take a look at that and take a human-centered approach to your bereavement policy. Yes, I get there has to be a policy. How flexible is that? If you are a leader, a manager of a team, and you are then having to, like you say, share that news, deal with that, you need to be grief educated. You need to know what to say, how best to support that person that's maybe coming back into the team having experienced a significant loss. You need to, more importantly, perhaps know what not to say. You need to understand what grief is so that you can understand the potential implications on their ability to do their job for the foreseeable. And you need to know how to best keep checking in with that person to, make sure that they have the best experience and that they're not one of the 51% that's walking out your door in a year's time. If you are an individual who is grieving, and this is where it gets, I suppose, trickier, because as a culture, we're not used to talking about our own feelings and grief. And this is where we just carry it around in that heavy backpack and it gets incredibly heavy. I always encourage people, why should the onus always be on the manager or the HR director? That's not fair. That's not fair if the person who is bereaved is not being honest and open and truthful about where they're at today. And that's what it comes down to. Grief changes moment to moment. They might go into the office that day feeling okay. Someone might walk past them wafting the perfume that smelled of their mum that they've just lost, and that might just collapse their world moment. You just never quite know. And so it's about that individual that's grieving, feeling, and this is where the sense of psychological safety at work comes in, feeling safe enough to go to their manager, another person that they trust, to say, this afternoon, I'm all over the place. What can be perhaps taken off my plate today? Because today's not a good day. And to be able to have that conversation without feeling that their job is then going to be at risk, or that they're seen as a lower performer, and all of those things. That's where it gets a bit more complex, and why we all need to be more grief literate. We all need to be more empowered to talk about our own grief, our own feelings, but also to support those who are sharing that very sensitive, and that is a privilege for someone to come and share that with you, to take that on and be, treat it with gentle curiosity and examine how they can be best supported. And then what if a colleague has passed away? There's EAPs are put in place, and people, I know when Pete, my husband, died where he worked, everyone was pointed to the EAP. I don't think anyone took them up on it. I think only 1 to 3% of the workforce actually use the employee assistance programs that are offered, and companies spend a lot of money on for counselling, for support. They were all obviously given the day off to attend his celebration of life. He was incredibly well-respected manager. But then kind of after that, I don't think anything was particularly put in place for them. This man that had a huge impact on not just his direct team, but everyone that worked with him. A lot of the measures that are put in place to help the individual, either the griever, but what about everybody else? What about the rest of the team? What about when Joe Bloggs comes back and you're the one that sits at the desk next to them and you haven't got the foggiest what to say?
I think an interesting point there about some of the things that organisations put in place aren't very effective, and not just with grief. There's a number of things that this would be true of, but they make the organisation feel better.
Yes.
I feel I've got a policy, or I've told people they can go and talk to these people, so I can sleep well at night because I've done my bit. But actually, your bit is about providing effective help that makes a difference to the individual. So unless you're going to get to that, you haven't done your bit yet.
No, you haven't. It's paying lip service to it, isn't it? Which makes people feel better. But if you're not actually going to truly get to know what grief is all about and really help support that person, then you're just paying. It's a tick box exercise, isn't it? That it makes you feel good. Yeah, we've covered that. Yeah, done, tick. And actually, you're not any better equipped than the next person.
And Lou, you've given some hints and tips about it as well. And I appreciate, to do it properly, we would be here for most of the day to really help people. But when we were talking, a couple of things that struck me, and I wonder if you've got any more like this. You were saying about actually making specific offers as opposed to general platitudes. I'm here if you need me, sort of thing. And the other thing that you had mentioned was actually people like to talk about the person they've lost.
And again, it's something that we won't mention them in case you haven't forgotten. And so so there's two things there. There's being really specific with your offers of help and support. So the whole generic, we're here if you need me, that's about as much use as a chocolate fire guard, to be honest. That person does not know what they need. And this is more difficult from a workplace point of view, but we've all got friends and family members who have been in this situation as well. Say to them, I am going to the supermarket. I'm going to pick you up some bits. Is Wednesday or Thursday better to drop it off for you? He's almost like offering them the choice, but there isn't a choice really.
Yeah.
My next door neighbour still actually puts my bins out for me. I haven't got a clue what day it is most of the time. Is it a green bin day or is it black bin day? Thank you, neighbour. She puts it out for me, and she started to do that. Really practical things. From a workplace perspective, things that have gone down well are like vouchers for, I think they're a national company, like Cook, that do like home cooked meals.
Oh, yeah.
Can actually eat, offering to, can I pick the kids up on my way to football training? I'll scoot your son up as well on the way. Really practical things like that are absolute gold to people who are in the depths of grief. And then talking about them, I always say to people, ask permission, because they might be having a wobbly day and they might not feel like they can talk about their person, but always ask. And it's like a beautiful bit of magic that you can give that grieving person is to, if you knew them as well, share a memory that you might have that they might not have even known about, and they will hold on to that like it's the most precious, precious gift in the world. And then if you didn't know them, just ask them to share a bit of that person with you. Tell me about your mum. What was she like? And that, again, is giving them the opportunity. They haven't forgotten that they've died, but it's helping that person bring them back to life again in their memory for that one small moment. And that is the greatest gift that you can give a grieving person. Don't be afraid of thinking, I don't want to remind them that they're dead. They have never forgotten that they're dead. I don't want to upset them. They're already upset. Ask them. And honestly, that's the single biggest gift that you can give to that person. Remember the anniversary. As a manager, one of the single sort of most effective things that you can do as a manager is make a note of the anniversary. But not only that, for extra brownie points, you can make a note, say the anniversary is on the 25th of June, make a note a couple of weeks before the 25th of June, because more often than not, the lead up to these big milestones is worse than the actual day itself, because the thought of it coming around or it happening, we're a year in. Often the day itself kind of comes and goes and it wasn't as bad as you were anticipating. Extra brownie points, check in 2-3 weeks before. How are you doing? Where are you at? And, have you got any plans for the day? Are you doing anything to remember your person by on the anniversary? Or, even days like Mother's Day, Father's Day, Valentine's Day, all these milestones that come along and make you feel really crap, and just makes it all feel extra heavy, that extra burden. Just make a note, ask, check in. And two words I use are gentle curiosity. So approach the grieving person with gentle curiosity when you're asking about the person, when you're asking how they are today, this week. Again, time specificity is really important when you're asking how the person is, because if you ask it, how are you? That's massive. Yeah. And in a place where their brain is absolutely jumbled, how are you? I don't know. I don't know how I am. I honestly don't know how I am. How am I today? Oh, right, that I can do. Today I can, get a grasp on. So it's being really, really specific.
If you've enjoyed our podcast, please share it with someone you think would benefit from it.
Also, like and follow us wherever you get your podcast, or on LinkedIn, TikTok, or YouTube. And 5-star reviews are always welcome.
And equally, if you've got any feedback on how we can improve the podcast, subjects you'd like us to cover, or questions we can help you with, please do get in touch. Email jimmy@ajobdonewell.com or james@ajobdonewell.com. Well, so you said get grief educated or become grief literate. How would I go about doing that? Where would you suggest I go to?
There's a lot of charities that do a lot of great work. And what I find with those is that they're very gentle, very compassionate. I'm much more kind of a bit like I would tell it how it is, because I'm living it. I've, had someone hide behind a bin, and that's just not acceptable.
Yeah.
And I didn't say anything to that person at the time, but now I would, because now I'm using my grief to empower people. And for me, it's right. How can you empower? It's not seeing it as something to be afraid of. It's, well, let's empower these people to be able to have better conversations. This is what I do in my work. I go in, I help empower people to understand what grief is, have better conversations so that they can be more confidently compassionate, because it's going to happen. Grief affects everyone. And yet it's probably the thing that is least sort of out there in terms of helping to educate people around how best to manage it.
And Lou, have you got a website that we can
put
in the
it's
show notes?
LouHynesCoaching.com. Yeah, you can come in, or you can contact me on LinkedIn, ask about my services, ask how I can support you.
We'll put a link in, and you're definitely worth following on LinkedIn, because some of the articles you put on LinkedIn are really, really informative and thought-provoking. So, we'll put that on our show notes as well.
Thank you very much.
Anything else, James, from you?
No, thank you very much for explaining to us.
And thank you, Lou, for sharing your incredible story, turning your grief into something so positive for so many people. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.